Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Your Life Unfiltered podcast. In this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests to connect the dots between their upbringing and what they're doing today. Today, we have special guest Shital Patel. Shital, if you want to quickly introduce yourself for everyone.
Sure. I'm Shital Patel and I'm 39 years old. And I was recently on the Netflix hit show, Indian Matchmaking. And I was living in New York City. Now I live in Miami. And I grew up in Edison, New Jersey.
All right,
Awesome.
fantastic.
Great to have you, Sheetal. So if you don't mind, if you can go back a few years, during your early upbringing, early childhood, and talk about any motivations, any inspirations that kind of stuck with you and that kind of followed you through what you're doing today. If you can connect the dots between that, would be great.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a pretty traditional Gujarati household. So both of my parents, my mom actually came here when she was 19, even before my dad came here. So my mom has been hustling. She's had many different interests, but unfortunately, she had to come here and work and help support the family. So she wasn't able to really delve into those interests. I mean, she wanted to be in entertainment, but she ended up doing some odds and ends jobs. And then when she married my dad, my parents had a convenience store for most of our childhood, even into early adulthood. So I've seen my parents hustle. They've worked really hard. I grew up, around a huge Patel family, and everyone in my family has just hustled and really made it from nothing. So that has always inspired me. I've never been someone that has been about instant gratification, even in this social media era. I know you can work smarter, and I'm all about that, but I do think there is something to be said about some, good old fashioned hard work, and that's my motto in life, and I've always stuck to that.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of your hustle that you're dealing with right now, with everything that you're doing, right? It comes from a lot of what you saw from your parents growing up. Is that like a fair statement?
Absolutely, absolutely. And both of my parents, but more so my mom, because she really didn't, as an Indian female in that generation, she didn't really have that many opportunities, but she really pushed to make sure that, it was very important for her, even though her family and in-laws didn't want her to work. It was very important for her to be financially stable on her own, and she really did pass on that to my sisters and I, and that was very important for us.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So there's probably a story there too, because you're a first generation American, right? Growing up in the US, similar to me in that sense. But have you seen like differences in the thought processes of, like, for example, parents or people that are not first generation Americans versus yourself?
In what sense?
Just in an overall thought process perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about, I guess, if we're talking about marriage, or settling down, there's definitely a huge difference in that space. Not really more so with my parents, but I've seen that with, other family members and other people I know from that generation, where it wasn't really about, as a woman, it wasn't about getting a job or building yourself up. It was, the focus really was on marriage. So I think in that perspective, there is definitely a clear difference, and you guys see that on the show as well.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. What about like passions and career paths and that type of sense?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I know from like a, if you look at it from a very traditional mindset, there's like people that shy away from going into the entertainment industry, for one hypothetical example, or like, shy away from certain career paths. So have you seen that, like that difference in mentality, like, throughout your childhood and growing up? And like, if so, like, what's been your like response to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, growing up in a traditional household, even my parents, as supportive as they were, they wanted us to be in a field. And back then, they didn't really even understand finance, but it was more so they always thought, okay, if you have a steady career and you're working for someone else, then you'll always, I guess, be safe, and they were very risk averse in that sense. So they were pushing me to go into a medical field or an engineering field, but I used humor as sort of just a coping mechanism growing up, because I was bullied a little bit. So I I was always funny, and I always wanted to be, I liked being in front of the camera. We had like one of those home like cameras back in the day. You guys probably don't even know what it is, but it was like
Camcorder.
a bulky old camera. And, my dad would take videos of us, and I would always like kind of put on a show. And in third grade, my mom still has this letter. The teacher asked me what I wanted to be, and I said I wanted to be myself. I wanted to be on TV, and I wanted to be myself. There was no reality TV. I didn't know what that was, but that's what I wanted to do. And so but I remember begging my parents. I was like, please, put me in acting classes or let me do something that's in the entertainment space, from what we knew about it, but they were never on board with that, because they thought it was crazy, and my whole family thought it was insane. And so they never, they didn't support me in that sense. And so I went on to college, I got a degree in neurophys. And then when I graduated, I ended up working at an energy company, but I always had the passion, of being in entertainment. So I applied to random things. I did, extra work when I was living in Baltimore. I really took anything that I could get. But there was a clear difference, in passions, because my parents' generation, they were more I guess the quote unquote normal job, which is in their eyes a desk job. And for me, I've always been really creative. And so I wanted to do something outside of that. And everyone that I knew told me that it was crazy.
But eventually, obviously, Sheetal, you hustled really hard for that, right? So, really hard to get into the entertainment industry, and you did make it to the show. Bravo!
Yeah.
You want to tell us more about that story? Like, how did you find the opportunity, or how did the opportunity found you?
Yeah, so I really loved that project, and it's
Mhm.
unfortunate that we didn't get as much press as that project deserved. But I was in Baltimore, so my company's based out of Baltimore, and so I was in Baltimore working, and a lot of shows for Netflix and HBO are filmed in Baltimore because they just have good tax benefits. So I applied to be an extra on Veep. This is HBO show, and so I got it. And so I was just, like when you're an extra, you're sitting around a lot and you get to network and you meet a lot of people. It's actually kind of fun. So I met somebody that was working in casting, and I was telling them about, and at that time, even in the extras, there weren't really that many diverse extras. It was like a few Indian people, and like there wasn't much diversity. But so I was talking about my experience of being Indian and how I get treated differently, as a female in my family that's single, and like my family didn't really value what I was doing in the workspace. It was more, oh, you need to get married. And so I don't know, he thought that was really interesting, and he was like, we're working on a project about gender bias. I had no idea what it was, and it was a social experiment about gender bias. And he was like, I think your story would be great to show as one of the stories. And so I got connected with someone at Bravo's casting, and so I told them about my story. And so I ended up getting cast for that. And it was cool because the social experiment actually has you transform into a man. So so I went into, so I had full prosthetics, and I had like a voice and movement coach and all of that. So it was kind of fun because I kind of I was able to act, and my family was fooled. They didn't know that it was me. The thing is, my character, my alter ego, it was Raj, and my boyfriend is Neeraj, but he goes by Raj. So just but anyway, so that project was cool because it was, I went into a situation with my family as me, and so it was like my mom, my dad, and like a bunch of extended family. And the first thing that you see that they ask is, they didn't ask what was going on in my life, like with my work and my accomplishments. It was, oh, you're still single, you're not married, and there was so much focus on that. But then when I went in as Raj, I went in as like my cousin's friend. They thought I was just a friend. My dad starts asking me about like my work, where I'm from, and I was a Wall Street trader. That was my job. And my dad is really into that. So he was asking me so many questions, and you see the clear difference between the two interactions. And it was really eye-opening for my parents to see that.
Wow,
Wow.
that's fascinating. Yeah. No, I'm just curious, once you're revealed in the
Uh-huh.
end, or I don't know if you're revealed
I did.
yet.
Well, not, I, yeah. I didn't reveal it at the place, but they saw the reveal because the prosthetics take 8 hours. So each time that I put
Wow.
prosthetics, it was 8 hours. It was freaking crazy. So I had to, after the lunch, I had to go back and get everything taken off, which took like another 2 hours or something. So my parents saw the transformation on the laptop, and my mom, it went over her head. She was like, I don't understand what's going on. My dad got it pretty quickly, and he realized that he was treating me differently. So it really helped our bond. We got a lot closer.
That's fascinating. But one question I'm thinking is that how did you fit that into your schedule? Because imagine like being cast for that takes up a lot of time, and I'm assuming you were having a day job at that time.
Absolutely.
Balance it too.
It was hard. It was really challenging. So I worked it out with Bravo. So we would film. We filmed over a course of, I think it was a few months, but most of the filming was done on the weekends and in the evenings, and then 2 or 3 days, I think, I had to take vacation days.
I
Oh,
see.
I see. Got it.
That makes sense. Wow.
Yeah, I made it work.
Yeah, that's the definition of making it work, actually.
It was a lot of practice getting into a character.
Oh, method acting. Okay.
Yeah, it was method.
And that too in front of your parents. I can only imagine,
I
how hard
It
must
was funny what
it must have been.
fires that we had to do just to, in preparation for the actual lunch that I had to see my parents as this character. They had me meet my cousin in Metuchen. Keto, I'm sure you're familiar with Metuchen. So like
Yep.
by the train station. So they wanted to see if I could actually pull it off. So I had been so used to like these aggressive Indian guys in the city, so I kind of just modeled myself after that. And my cousin, flipped out on me on the street, and she's like, "You're so creepy," and all this stuff. So it was also kind of eye opening for me to get into character as a man, because I'm like, wow, I saw this like one type of guy, and like that's what I had in my head, and it was just interesting.
Wow. So I'm just curious, did people reach out to you afterwards sharing their own experiences as
Yeah.
well? Because they've been in the same boat, right? So anything that sticks out from those interactions?
I got a lot of messages from women, Indian women especially. And the other thing that I had mentioned on the show is I'm one of three, so I have two younger sisters who, my middle sister was already married by that point, and my younger sister was about to get engaged. And so, I had even more pressure. So that really resonated with a lot of Indian girls. So they reached out to
Hmm.
me, sharing similar experiences. And and maybe it wasn't gender bias with their parents necessarily, but it was like in their family, or maybe even with their friends, where they were being treated differently because they were single. And so they really resonated with that. And then I think to see me talk about my accomplishments, and then ultimately be able to show my parents that they were treating me differently, and get that bond back, was really hopeful and inspirational for a lot of people.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Yeah, it's always interesting where people may think you're treating you one way, but then subconsciously they may be treating you another just because they have those inherent biases that they don't realize until someone reveals those biases to them.
Exactly. And you said it so well. That is exactly what my dad said at the end of the show.
Microaggressions, I guess
Yeah,
that's the
because
term.
he didn't know, right? That was his
Yeah.
upbringing, and it's up to us to break that cycle.
Yeah, bring attention to it. That's
Yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah. So I guess that was your first time acting, correct? Or did you do any acting before then?
No, no, that was my first time.
Okay. And like I'm sure you had like an idea of what you expected out of acting. And then how was it like that? What's the word? That juxtaposition of what you thought it was going to be like versus how it actually was.
It was a lot more difficult, than I thought. It's not glamorous. It's a lot of work to bring your mind into a space of being that person, and separating that from who I am.
And you're
Oh,
also
got it.
exposing yourself, right? Like to the world, to the cameras, through the cameras, and
Yeah,
just it's out there for people to see, and it's definitely a hard
definitely.
uh,
Oh, that
part.
the,
That
the criticism, and then comments and all of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that, but you're right. You're basically making yourself vulnerable, right? It's because you can't control the way people will perceive it. You can't control how the edits will be done. It's definitely opens yourself up to vulnerability for
Yeah,
sure.
you're and those contracts are not forgiving. So you do sign your life away on those edits. Um,
Would you do it again for, let's say, in some other context, in some other
I would.
type of a show?
I would. That gave me a lot of confidence because, you
Hmm.
know, it's really scary going into a situation. I think it would have been almost easier if I went into a room full of strangers, but I was going into a room with my parents and my family. Like my mom gave birth to me. I'm like, she's gonna know, and to kind of get into a space where I don't, you have your tells, right? We all have our tells of things we do, whether it's,
Oh yeah.
I move with my hands, I use my hands a lot, or like certain things that I say. And so you have to be so cognizant of all of that because your parents are going to know. I mean, they know you better than anyone.
That's what I was saying. Look, just imagining it happen, it makes
Mhm.
me, think like it must have been really, really hard, to act in front of your parents and act somebody else, a completely different person than you are. So,
Yeah.
kudos to you for
They,
making that happen.
I mean, just, I only lasted like 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, I started sweating. I was like, get me out of here. But to 30 minutes. So.
Awesome. All right, so fast forward to a few months ago. So obviously you recently was on an Indian matchmaking show, super hit. I think everybody just unanimously loved your presence on the show. But talk to us about, like, how did you get it in the first place? Like, where did it all start? And then we can go from there.
Sure. So, in 2021, I think is when the casting call had gone out, and
Hmm.
so at that point, 2020 we're still in the pandemic, but 2020 there was the lockdown, and so much had already happened. So I had already started this journey of working on myself in 2020, and I was in a
Hmm.
space where I really wanted to meet somebody. At the same time of wanting to meet someone, I still wanted to progress in the entertainment industry. And I did want to do something, in front of the camera again. So I saw the casting call. I didn't even know it was for Indian matchmaking, but I had been applying to things like all throughout the pandemic.
Hmm.
I didn't get anything. And then in 2021, I applied to Indian matchmaking. I know I actually applied to another show, and that didn't get greenlit by Netflix. And so the casting company reached out to me and they're like, I think this was in February of 2021. They were like, we're working on this other show. It's a second season of a dating show, an Indian dating show. And I don't know why I didn't put that together, but I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I was like, I want to meet somebody for sure. And I think it'll be fun to share my story. So I went through like a few Zoom rounds and auditioning, and then I got it. And then once I got the show and I signed the NDA, then they were like, "Oh, it's Indian matchmaking." And then of course I was like so excited.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So when did the filming happen? Was it last year or this year?
Last year.
Or like,
So it we started last year.
got
Oh,
it.
got
Got it.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know it seems like the time space thing with reality TV. It's like, yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So, um, tell us a little bit more about. So, obviously, in front of camera,
Mhm.
you're conscious about, because the camera is there, it's watching you, you're being recorded. How hard was it for you to just be yourself while cameras were around and they're recording you and things like that?
So I think I think it was there were parts that were difficult. Obviously going on a
Hmm.
date is awkward enough. I mean, I had been going on many dates in New York, and a lot of them were already awkward without the cameras. So with the cameras on, and especially some of the people that they set me up with the cameras on, it was pretty awkward. But at the same time, I think the Bravo experience helped me get more comfortable. So I didn't really feel. I think the edit captured me pretty authentically. So there was no, like, I didn't feel like I wasn't myself. But there was definitely some awkwardness. I mean, you guys could see that on the viral date. That was pretty awkward.
Yeah, yeah.
It seemed like that. I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that
that was super
episode. It
awkward.
seemed like it. It seems like there was a lot of nervousness and then a lot of nervous jokes made, if I remember the episode
from
correctly.
from both ends.
Yeah.
Because I think I mean, I don't know if you guys are single, but I think when you're, at least for me, when I was single and dating, I would form a judgment pretty quickly. So like in the first like few minutes, you know, I would know if I vibe with this person or whatever, or if I was going to go on a second date. Like I knew pretty quickly. I'm very decisive. So they showed Viral came to my sister's house and met my parents. So that was all on camera, you know, and that was like, I didn't even know that was going to happen. So I had already had this like super awkward experience with him. And at that point I already knew, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to continue. He's a great guy and he's funny and nice, but it just wasn't my vibe. And then you take that into the coffee shop date. So it just got even more awkward.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely hard. Again, it's just putting yourself out there, you know, and in real life, real sense, you know, it's even harder. I guess in that sense, acting is a little bit easier because you're portraying someone else. In this case, you're
Yeah.
portraying
You're portraying yourself. That's true.
Absolutely. In that moment, I was like, I wish I was portraying anyone else.
So
Like,
So,
I'm,
go
I
for
was
it.
gonna say, I'm sure you probably have a new appreciation for the show now, because I'm guessing season one you saw, it sounds like you're a fan of because you're excited to be on season two. But like, what was like the biggest surprising piece of being on the show versus seeing it for the first time for season one?
you know, and this is going to be, I know not everyone will agree with me that was on the show, but at least this is my perspective. You know, I thought season one was great, and I thought a lot of that was scripted and there was a lot of editing. But to be completely honest with you, you know, our production team, they don't actually, what they do in edit is different, but they don't actually push you to say anything. So it wasn't scripted.
Hmm.
None of the show was scripted. Like those were our actual reactions, those were real dates. You know, so in that sense I was very surprised because, you know, I've seen and heard things about other reality shows, and you know, you can't really believe what you see, but in this show it was pretty real, I guess, as real as you can get.
Oh,
Got it.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you guys have the GoPros or something like that for like off camera type of stuff? Because I know we interviewed a few other people from the cast of season one and season two, and they were telling us that for some pieces of it, there was like a lot of footage that was made the final cut that was like GoPro footage.
Yeah, so they funny, they gave me a GoPro. I just didn't know how to use it. So I, so, you know, I just aged myself. But so I didn't use the GoPro, but they did give us GoPros. So
Got it.
I had some footage that was done via Zoom. So I had like a conversation with Avi via Zoom. So that was used in the final cut.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Is there any myth that you would like to bust about the show in terms of, you know, how the storylines are portrayed, but you know somehow they were misinterpreted? Maybe about yourself, maybe about somebody
Mhm.
else, without naming anyone.
Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, some myths that I'd like to. I'm just trying to think what I can say, what I can't say. Um, I mean, like, can we table this? Let's table.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
I'll answer it, but let me just be careful.
No worries.
That's no
Okay.
worries. You totally get it. Okay.
Yeah, it's we can
Um,
also take it off the record because this is not live. We're gonna make edits to it, so we can.
Okay, I'll tell you guys off.
Yeah.
okay. All right. So I think one question that I have is, Sheetal, and since you've gone through this recently, what advice do you have for people who are kind of struggling with the marriage pressure from their parents? Especially, I'm talking about the Indian diaspora, and a lot of us are in that boat right now. So, any advice from you, from your experience, that you can share?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I've had marriage pressure since I was like 12 because my grandmother lived with us. So I think
Oh my God.
yeah,
That explains it. You don't have to say anymore. I got it already.
kind of. But apart from that, I think the biggest lesson I learned, and the biggest thing that I did with my family that works, is setting clear boundaries with them. So whenever that line was crossed, I mean, I told them, you know, this is where I'm at. I'm not going to marry someone just to marry them. I'm going to wait for the right person. I always told them that. I set boundaries. And if I felt like they were crossing that boundary or my family was crossing that boundary, I just removed myself from the situation. Sometimes you have to do, I guess it's what I call like a mental diet. So sometimes, when you go home, and I know it's not easy for everyone, if you live at home or you're going to a lot of family things, you're surrounded by a lot of family and they're pressuring you. But to a certain point, you have to have that mental diet, because if you keep sitting there and listening to that, it does affect you, and it's ultimately going to stop you from, or it'll put you into desperation mode or fear mode. I felt that sometimes, and you never want to operate from that or feel, because I think when you're doing that, then you end up settling, not just marriage, but all areas of your life. So I would say set clear boundaries with your family early on. It's hard, I think, for South Asians a lot of times to have those kinds of conversations, because we didn't grow up having those conversations with our family. So it's weird, they're like, what do you mean? Like, what's a boundary? I mean, they don't understand that. But I think it's, if you can find a way to communicate that with them, it works.
All right,
Got it.
fantastic. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay. So how's your life has changed since the show aired? Has it changed at all, or?
Yeah, it's been great. It's apart from, we can get into my relationship, but apart from that, which has been, obviously one of the best things, I've gotten a lot of messages from a lot of people just saying that, I've given them hope and inspired them not to settle and to wait for the right person. So I think, well, what more can I ask for?
Absolutely.
I think that's it's pretty amazing. I never want to, I know how it felt to be pressured or to feel like I wasn't enough because I was single, and seeing other people around me settling down. So I think if I can help someone kind of get through that, it's great.
Great.
Yeah, and you've actually set an example for a lot of people actually. And so,
Mhm.
like it happens in Indian family. Hey, look at the that person, how they're doing. So I think you've set a great example for everyone to kind of look up to. And so kudos to you for doing that actually and telling your story in front of everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, since you mentioned the relationship, we actually, it's a perfect segue to the
Hmm.
next round of questions that I have. A couple of them. It's just, how did your and Neeraj's story start in the
So,
first place? Because we saw the end of it. Obviously, we saw like how it
mhm.
kind of reached a conclusion, an amazing conclusion. But how did it all start?
Yeah, sure. So, I had mentioned that I started filming last year, and so
Hmm.
in this, I had already, and this is kind of another thing that I'll just say this because I get a lot of questions about, how do you meet people? People are tired of the apps, and I think one of the biggest things that I did was I sort of put my ego aside, and I really just started asking family members and friends, and I put myself out there in a big way, and I was like, this is what I'm looking for. I'm really ready. And I used my network. I was like, we're Indian. We have a huge network. Just reach out to the people that actually know you, not like a random auntie, but reach out to the people that really know you. They know what you want. So my sisters already knew that I was looking for someone, but I had reached out to a few friends. And so in December of last year, my one of Neeraj and I have a mutual friend. She reached out to me via Instagram, and she was like, "Hey, I have this great guy. He's a doctor. He's in Miami." And at that time, I didn't really want to do long distance, but I stalked him on YouTube because he had a bunch of videos up. And so I was like, "Oh, this guy, seems really nice. He helps cancer patients. He's cute." So I was like, "Okay, sure, set me up." But for whatever reason, like she got busy or wasn't on top of her mind, and so she didn't follow through with that. And it just so happened that during the pandemic, my middle sister moved to Boca in Florida, and so her neighbors are doctors. And so in January, I was telling her this story that our friend tried to set us up, and she was like, she's like, my neighbors are, they're doctors, and the medical community in South Florida, I don't think it's that big. Let me just see if they know him. And so it turns out that they knew, they had a mutual friend that knew Neeraj really well. And so they called him at dinner and they were like, you got to reach out to this girl. And so he was sweet. He reached out, pretty quickly. And so we ended up talking for 2 months just via text. And so we really got to know each other really well, actually, surprisingly, through text before we even met. And then we went on a few dates. And then, yeah, we realized that, we wanted to be exclusive, and take it to the next level.
That is
That's
awesome.
awesome.
And I should mention actually, Ketan and I, we did talk to Raj yesterday.
Oh,
I
I know.
don't know if you know.
Yeah, so we got the
I
inside scoop
too
before your
much
scoop here.
of it, but I didn't hear too much of it, but I heard a lot of talking. So I was like, yep, that's Neeraj. He's on a podcast.
It was an absolute fun conversation with him. So
Cool.
awesome, awesome. Ketan, do you have any other
I
questions on
do.
that?
I do.
Mhm.
One last question, and we'll probably move to the rapid fire round.
Okay.
So my question is, how has your perspective changed before you were on the show versus after being on the show?
Okay.
Just
Perspective on love.
yeah, relationships, love, settling, not settling, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, you know, when I started the show, I was pretty firm about the not settling. I knew, you know, what I wanted, but I think one of the things that Simanti uses on the show is the list. And so, you know, a lot of times we have these like long lists of things that we want, and you know, for me, I had this list and I was pretty rigid on it, and I didn't necessarily look into where those things were coming from. So, you know, like I had one of the things I had on there was skydiving, but the show really forced me to look at my list and say, okay, what did I actually mean by that? And what was I actually looking for, you know, from a real place? And so when I looked at skydiving, for example, you know, on the show, they want to put something blatant, but it was really someone that's willing to try different things, you know, and that's adventurous. So I think for me, prior to doing the show, I had this list, and I think a lot of the things on the list were a little superficial, and I didn't know where they were coming from. But the show really forced me to look at, you know, what I really wanted.
Awesome.
Okay, great answer, actually. Yeah, so it's basically it sounds like it did change your perspective, right? It just made you think through what is actually important and what is less important.
Absolutely.
All right.
Got it.
I think that is the last of the questions for me before we move to rapid fire round. Deepam, all yours.
Yeah. All right. So I think it'll be interesting to see your responses because we have Neeraj's responses as well
Okay.
already. So it'll be interesting how it goes to kind of stack up against each other.
Okay.
All right. So let me know when you're ready and we'll jump right in.
Okay, I'm ready.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Okay. Mountains or beaches?
Mountains or beaches? Mountains. I don't know why I thought that.
2 for 2 so far. Just for the keep
Yeah.
record. 2 for 2.
Okay.
You guys are a match there.
Okay.
Oh yeah, is it like? Didn't you say
He's-
beaches?
No, he said mountains. I remember that. Mountains and coffee.
Wow,
Okay.
thank God, because I never want to go on a beach vacation.
Okay. Morning person or night owl?
Morning person.
3 for 3. What's your favorite comfort food?
Peanut butter. This is not going to be the same as Neeraj's.
Yeah, no way. You're not expecting that. What's your favorite virtue in others?
Reciprocity.
Okay, interesting. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Tardiness.
Okay. What's your secret superpower that people don't really know about?
I know a lot about sci-fi. So if it like The Expanse, Dune, I know like all the characters and the storylines.
Wow.
It sounds like we just determined the genre of your next TV show that you're going to be on.
I'd love to do something.
Awesome. What's a superpower you wish you had?
A superpower. I wish I could read people's minds.
Ooh,
That's a good one.
interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I think that actually is the end of our rapid fire round. I have a follow-up question, which is not a rapid fire, is what's been your biggest accomplishment last 1 or 2 years?
My biggest accomplishment is building resilience. So I've had many setbacks and just different things that I've gone through in the last 2 years, and just building that resilience. I'm really proud of that.
Oh, that's actually a great thing to mention because we also had the pandemic over the last couple of years. So I wonder, is it like the two of them tied or is independent of the pandemic?
No, they're tied. They're tied.
Okay.
It's a pandemic, you know, it's like I was in New York City by myself, so it forced me to sit with myself, you know, and so it was a lot of learning the last couple of years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Cool. So actually, this is a side question, more for my curiosity, but we actually interviewed Dose of Shivs on Instagram, Shivani Shah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I did notice that you guys were connected. How do you guys know each other? I'm so
we're
curious.
friends. So Shivani is Small Brown World. She is best friends with my brother-in-law's cousin.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting.
I
Like
see.
they're very, very close. I've seen her at like family things, and so we connected on Instagram. She's great.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. It was interesting because like when we reached out to get you on the podcast, I noticed that you also had a mutual connection with her. I was like, wait, that's so
Yeah,
interesting. I wonder how you know
yeah, no. You guys are so fun, by the way. Like this is
her.
one of
Thank
my
you.
favorite
Thank you.
podcasts. Like so chill, so fun.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Um, okay, so Sheetal, given all of this, like what's next for you? What's coming next for you? I know you just moved to Miami.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm continuing my acting classes. Hopefully, I'll get a sci-fi gig now. Um, but one of my passions, apart from the day stuff that I do with sustainability, is a lot of the things that I do. I think it's really cool that I can inspire women. So I'd love to start a podcast with other women that inspire me, and just see some of their challenges and be able to share their stories. So that's something I'm working on.
That is amazing. So I think you're doing all the right things if that's your goal, because getting on more podcasts will get you a sense of how, the different styles and structure of podcasts and all that. And like it'll set you up with the knowledge to do your own at some point.
Yeah, no, aspire to you guys are this has been awesome. So just great. You guys are very real.
Perfect.
All right. We did want to give you an opportunity to plug any of your social media or website or whatever else you'd want to share with our listeners here. The
So
floor is yours.
my Instagram and TikTok, it's the same. It's the real Shital Patel, and my website is shitalpatel.com.
Fantastic.
Uh, Perfect. So Sheetal, we're actually reaching towards the end of our
Okay.
discussion. But before we wrap, I just wanted to ask one question. So, do you have any recommendations for our listeners? And a recommendation for reference could be a movie, a book, podcast, anything that you came across recently that really stuck with you or inspired you in some
Mhm.
way.
So I'll give you a podcast recommendation, which I've been listening to a lot recently, is the Lewis Howes School of Greatness. And he has a
Hmm.
lot, I mean, he has manifestation coaches, like fitness gurus on there, all different, really highly motivational, inspirational people that come on as his guests. And I think he's great. So Lewis Howes School of Greatness.
All right. Thank you
Perfect.
so much for that.
Definitely check out.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was a really fun and eye-opening conversation. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Um, yep. Thank you. I did also want to give a shout out to our listeners here. Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you guys are not already connected to the Your Life Unfiltered podcast, please be sure to give us a follow on Spotify and Instagram. It's at Your Life Unfiltered. And we would absolutely love it if you can also leave us a review. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.